A lot of people are hyping up fasting as if it's the answer to fat loss. And I actually think it's a terrible strategy, my friend, when it comes to sustainable fat loss. Now, before you get too triggered, I do intermittent fasting every single day. I tend to eat within a 6 to 8 hour window, sometimes a 10-hour window. And, I won't eat for about 16 hours. And I don't even look at it as fasting because you're fasting for 8 hours in your sleep. Now, for me, I just operate better in the mornings when I have my black coffee and I don't eat till about midday. But what works for me is not going to work for most. And the problem is most people have struggled, and you probably have too, at some point in terms of losing weight, gaining it back, or maybe just not carrying more body fat than you want to carry. And the question you need to ask yourself is, why am I carrying more fat than I need to be carrying? Why do I lose weight and gain it back? And a lot of that is going to be multifactorial, but it's going to come down to the behaviors with food. So you have to build a solid foundation first before you use fasting. And fasting is a great tool to have in your toolbox, but it needs to be used later down the line for most people. And look, there's loads of different types of fasting, but the thing is, it can add fuel to the fire, right? Whatever type of fasting that is, it can really add fuel to the fire because a lot of people are already stressed. They're already running on cortisol. They're already relying on caffeine for energy because they're not sleeping great. Already got a stressful lifestyle, working long hours. And then you just decide to cut food out. And what does that do? That obviously is going to add fuel to the fire. And a lot of people end up worse off because then they binge when they bring the food back in. They're restricting again. It's just another type, what they call it, time restricted eating is another type of fasting, basically. So they're trying to restrict calories again, but because the food quality they're eating is not the best, and then it might get to the weekend, they'll sabotage, or they'll get to the evening after not eating all day. It's a big mistake I see a lot of people make. They get home, they've had a stressful day, either reach for the wine or open the snack drawer, and then, you might have your normal meal, and then you get carried away because you're not in a position to be implementing fasting. In fact, it does more harm than good to most people based on my experience having coached so many people. So there's different types, right? So you've got the OMAD, which is the one meal a day, which is what I'll use every now and then. Normally, I only use that now when I feel like my gut needs a little bit of a reset, the one meal a day. Generally, I'll have 2 meals a day, like I said. So that's like you can do the 16-8, where you're fasting for 16 hours, eating for an 8-hour window. You could do, 18-8, 24, whatever. There's loads of different types. There's a 24-hour fast as well, which some people will do once a week or intermittently. And then you've got those kind of crazy prolonged types of fast, right? Which is like 72 hours, 3 days. Now, we can't deny the health benefits, which I'll get to, of course, but they even use those type of fasts for like cancer patients and stuff now, right? Because of autophagy and lots of other stuff that happens within the body. So what we're going to look at is fasting equals restriction, right? So again, most people, they've struggled with food. They have struggled going back to old behaviors, right? You might lose some weight, like over 90% of people. They lose a significant amount of weight and gain it all back. If you're listening to this, I have, everyone has. Everyone's lost fat and gained it back, right? So the problem with that is you're restricting again. You're trying to do what you've done in the past, but you're just putting a fancy label on it, fasting. So you can tell all your friends because it sounds very, very cool. I fast. Oh, what protocol do you use? You know what I mean? So the problem is, like I say, the binging. Also, a big one is under eating protein as well, right? This is a big challenge on fasting. When you eat it in a tiny window, then it's harder to get that protein in to a small meal. Now, not everyone can eat like me, where I eat, like today I had like 800, 900 grams of meat for my first meal. My last meal I had like another 400 grams of meat. No problem. I can eat massive portions. I feel fine. But 90% of people are not going to do that. And look, I would like to say, if it's working for you, fasting, and you feel amazing, everything is operating fantastically, physically you're in the shape you want to be in, you feel great, your sleep is phenomenal, your energy's off the charts, congratulations. You're going to get value out of this anyway, but that's not who I'm speaking to. Most of you are not exactly where you want to be. You want to improve the way your body looks. More importantly, you want to improve your health. So you've got to be hitting protein. You've got to be hitting those fundamentals first, eating mainly single ingredient foods, right? Eating real foods and complete meals, protein, fat, minerals on your plate. Ideally fiber. That's another conversation. Ideally fiber for most on your plate as well, right? 90% of your plate needs to be non-processed, real food, minimizing refined sugars, single ingredient foods, right? And then also you need to be hydrated, doing all the usual stuff, right? Before you look at fasting as a tool later down the line. Now, skipping meals doesn't build discipline, right? What builds discipline is actually making better decisions with food and fueling your body in a way, it's like it's like someone you care about, right? I know it sounds cheesy, but you need to love your body, right? You're treating your body with care like you would a best friend, right? You need to care for your body, feed it with what it needs to perform, feel, and then as a side effect, you look good, right? When you're doing those things. So, look, intermittent fasting. Let's talk about that first. A lot of people, the challenges they face and where they fall down is they'll go from being overweight. This is most people being overweight, and then I heard my friend Susie's fasting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fast, right? She lost 30 pounds fasting. I'm going to fast. What Susie has done is she's put herself into a calorie deficit. And what did I say earlier? Over 90% of people, well, 6 out of 7 people, right? But 90% of people over that will gain all the weight back they lost and more within 1 year normally, or up to 2 years. That's the majority of people. And when they do these, I saw some of these studies on time restricted eating, which is basically fasting, and 40 pounds they lost in 12 weeks. But where's the follow up 2, 3 to 5 years later? Some of them will keep it off, but and I hate that conversation as well about it doesn't matter what you eat. The window of time that you eat is the most important thing. Now, there's a great book on this. Didn't agree with a lot of the nutrition stuff with the fasting, but with the actual circadian rhythm and sleep, it's called The Circadian Code by Dr. Sanjay Patra. I forgot the name now, but it's called The Circadian Code. Really, really good book. However, when it comes to those studies that they state in there, it's the long term that you want to see. Now, most people are not going to keep that weight off from fasting because they're not getting to the root cause. It's like a symptom eruption. What happens at most points for most people is they'll restrict the food. Then when they go back to how they were eating before, because this is what people don't look at. What happens when I go back to eating and living the way I was before I started doing this fancy new thing, i.e. fasting? You go backwards because you gain all of the weight back very easy. Unless you've had a strategy and replaced like reverse dieting, which fasting is kind of the opposite of, right? Then it ain't going to work for you. So let's get into, for most people, like how you can utilize this, how I utilize this. So for me, I tend to wake up in the morning. Obviously, I don't eat anything till midday. Like I say, I'll have my first meal at lunchtime generally. Sometimes I might have a little bit of dark chocolate before that, right? But, 80, 90% of the time, I'll have my one meal in the daytime, lunchtime. Then I have another meal at least 4 hours before I go to sleep. So I finish eating by about 5:30. I aim for lately, 6 maximum, right? 6 p.m., but about 5:30, 5:45. And I feel good doing that. I've been doing this for probably about 9, 10 years now. And the reason I do is because it fits into my lifestyle. It's convenient. Eating is almost like a distraction for me, right? So if I'm eating, then I'm not going to be working. I'm not going to be productive. So I don't want you to look at it as necessarily a distraction, but look, you can see my muscle mass. No problem building muscle. And that's another myth as well when it comes to fasting, like muscle's going to fall off your body. Now, to be honest, it's not going to be ideal. If your main goal is to build muscle, it's not going to be the best approach. Obviously, eating 2 meals a day or eating 1 meal a day, definitely not. And eating in a small window, because it's very hard to consistently be in a calorie surplus when you're doing that. So it is better most of the time if you can spread those meals out, eat 3 meals. Now, there's also a myth as well. They say, it's not a myth, but it's very much overrated when it comes to muscle protein synthesis, for example. Now, when we look at fasting, if you eat 2 meals a day, you're not going to build muscle, right? Because you've got to make sure after training, for example, that you eat within that, 1 hour window, ideally, right? Or you eat 30 grams of protein straight after training, ideally, right? As soon as you can after training. I can't remember what the protein window is now. And if you don't do that, then you're just not going to maximize results with building muscle. There's some science to show that, but the reality is when you actually are in a calorie surplus, when you eat enough food, that's number one, and you hit enough protein, you hit your protein target throughout the daytime, the other things don't matter. They're like pebbles, right? The big rocks, hitting protein, eating enough calories, and obviously having a proper training program, they're the most important things. Then when it comes to protein timing, what times you eat the protein, how many meals you're having a day, that is secondary when it comes to building muscle. I can tell you now, like I say, I'm currently eating 2 meals a day and I actually feel bigger than I've been in a while right now, actually under this light. So I've got a bit of an itchy nose here. Excuse me. So look, when it comes to building muscle, fasting is not going to be ideal, but you can still utilize it. I would say to utilize it more as a tool when you're trying to build muscle and throw it in, for example, maybe once or twice a week, just to throw a bit of a curveball and to give your gut a bit of a break as well. Because what you find is when you're trying to build muscle and you're trying to eat more consistently, it takes its toll, right? Because your gut has to digest more food all the time and it's constantly in a surplus. So I find it can work well to reset your gut. And that's the way I like people to look at fasting. It is a tool for health. We can't deny the studies on autophagy. For example, the longer fast, the prolonger fast, right? 72 hours. They use that for a lot of ailments now, illnesses and stuff, particularly cancer, right? Because of autophagy. Autophagy, what it is that basically the immune system regenerates itself. So the blood cells, all the old blood cells, all the old immune cells get wiped out and they get replenished with new ones when you starve the body, right? And there's so much benefit to doing that. And I know, for example, now if I threw in like a 24-hour fast once a week, it would only be good for me because I have a solid foundation with food and I am eating good food for the most part. But if most people try and throw a 24-hour fasting straight away, that's going to be a problem. So you always got to start slow with fasting. But going into the benefits first, you've got autophagy, which is where the immune system regenerates itself. Obviously, even neurogenesis, right? Normally for the prolonged fasts, get most of these benefits, but even shorter fasts can have some benefits on the body, right? Because think about it, the body has to take care of its natural processes, right? Cell repair, digestion, all those kind of things. And if you're constantly pumping it with food, it's constantly having to go to work and digest that food. And it's strenuous on the body, right? And on the gut over time. So you've got the cellular cleanup process. Also, when it comes to longevity, there's actually research on this to show, reduced risk in disease when you are fasting regular. I think that was more of an intermittent fasting protocol, that particular study, brain clarity, mood, all those kind of things. Also blood sugar control. There's all these different things, and even human growth hormone release, right? It can go up sometimes 2 to 5 times higher, your growth hormone, which is, growth hormone is a cell, it regenerates every single cell in the body, right? Growth hormone, it is what it says in the tin, right? It helps your body grow and regenerate, essentially. So it can actually elevate that as well. There's some research to show it can help with muscle preservation, but I'm not really kind of sold on that one. But going back to what I was saying, you want to start slow with fasting. If you're someone who eats, 8 a.m. in the morning, breakfast, start off by extending it for like 2 hours. So maybe 10 a.m., you break that fast instead of having that food at 8 a.m. Start there, because a lot of people, they go to extremes. I'm going to go straight into doing a 24-hour fast. Like, if you're going in any longer than a 24-hour fast, it's just stupid if you ask me. Start slow. Maybe, I recommend most people don't skip breakfast. I mean, some people can. That's what I tend to do, right? So I'm being a hypocrite. But most people, that's actually the biggest problem for most people. All the people I've coached, they skip breakfast and they get too busy in the daytime and they're having a lunch and it's not really that much protein. It's like a decent amount of protein. They might not be prepared. It's probably not a complete meal. Then they get home in the evening and they're absolutely ravenous. They get home, they're stressed. You got the snack drawer there, and then boom, you open that pantry and you start just eating like an asshole, like I say, right? Or whatever else. So you need to be eating earlier in the daytime. Most people, in fact, that's what I challenge a lot of my clients to do, because they are so busy that they struggle with weight gain, they struggle to get in shape. And number one, they're not hitting protein because they're not having the breakfast. That's another thing. It's like I say, it's much harder when you're fasting, eating a smaller window to actually hit protein, because you've got a smaller window to get it in, right? But when you have the breakfast, it can actually boost energy levels, having breakfast anyway, and give you a little stimulation of dopamine. Also, it is going to help you get the protein in, and also give you energy as well sometimes, in some cases, right? Because we think when we're in a fasted state that we're full of energy, but a lot of the time it's just cortisol levels, right? Your cortisol levels are going to be elevated in the fasted state. So we end up just running on the stress hormones. And then we say, wow, this fasting is really working for us. And this is what I've said before, much to the pushback from the carnivore space. It's like a lot of people who do carnivore keto, they wake up super early in the morning, like, oh, I wake up really early, I'm raring to go. A lot of times your cortisol levels are through the roof, right? So you're just not getting optimal sleep, and you're waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. thinking it's normal. Is it normal, though, is my question to that. So look, it's not a one size fits all. Everyone's different. That's how you can kind of utilize fasting, I would say, is to start slow, maybe extend the fast for 2 hours, break your fast at 10 a.m. instead of 8 a.m., for example. Or even better, you could just do it, eat early in the daytime. So eat breakfast, lunch, and then maybe have a really early dinner. That's even better, right? The earlier you can cut your food off before bedtime, it's going to be better. But it sounds good on paper. But let's be honest, most of us, I like to have a nice meal in the evening. It's just not realistic for most, right? So I think most people tend to just like fast in the daytime and then just eat in the evening. But that can be a problem, as I say, and you can actually eat like an asshole when you do that, right? So look, what I'm actually offering on this as well is I wanted to give you an opportunity to get a free metabolic assessment. So you may have tried fasting, losing weight in the past, and you might not be where you want to be in terms of your physique. And if you're struggling to get the results you want to get, this metabolic assessment tells you exactly what you need to do, what food you need to eat precisely for your metabolic type. And it gives you a metabolic score, and then gives you I'll give you a game plan specific to your lifestyle and results that you want, which will help you optimize your metabolism and really get into the shape of your life. And I'm going to give that away for free. So the link is just beneath. If you want a free metabolic assessment, check that out. So look, what we're going to look at as well, right, is I want to touch on the snake diet, right? Because a lot of people have asked me this in my DMs and stuff. If you'll get that guy on, I forget his name now. I'm not even going to mention his name, right? I'm not going to give him a shout out because he's an absolute donut. Everyone knows who he is, the snake diet guy. And people have said, get him on. Not in a million years will I get him on. I think he's a plonker, if I'm honest. And I honestly think it's ridiculous that, okay, yeah, some people can have the one meal a day. Yeah, eat like a snake. If you're with me here, there's a snake diet where, just in case you didn't know what it was, basically pushing fasting and then feasting, essentially. So pushing 72-hour fast in some cases. Even one meal a day is probably like the least extreme it is one meal a day, and then a 72-hour fast, and it's having like what they call like snake juice, where you're having electrolytes instead of eating, and all this extreme stuff, which is a load of BS for most people. Because again, most people have struggled to restrict food, and then what are they doing with fasting? They're restricting again. So I think it's a joke for most people. Like I've just said, I think it can be used as a really good tool, fasting in your toolbox, but it needs to be used later down the line for most people. I can count on one hand that I actually have clients implementing fasting. Now, naturally, they do it. A lot of my clients naturally only have 2 meals a day anyway, so they are technically doing intermittent fasting. But when I'm talking about so that's intermittent fasting. I don't really look at it like fasting. That it's just like I'm breaking my fast a bit later in the daytime. You know what I mean? And that's what a lot of my clients do, and it works well for them. A handful of them anyway, but I can count on one hand how many of them I have practicing, 24-hour fasts. It's very few, because it's a tool you need to use later down the line as a health, and also just abstinence, right? Abstaining from food. It can be really, really valuable for you to abstain from food and abstain from anything, right? Because that then teaches you discipline. That can be good once you build that solid foundation, abstaining from food, of course. Once you are eating real foods, once you're exercising consistently, you're getting enough sunlight, all those lifestyle things. But just with nutrition, you're eating real food, you're having protein, hitting a protein target consistently. You're not binge eating, you're not sabotaging, right? You might have a few wobbles here and there like you do. That's when it can be a good tool then to just abstain from food for a day, for example, right? And do a 24-hour fast. So that can be a good thing. I think it can develop another layer of discipline, and that could be like even caffeine, which I'm not going to do, by the way. That's what I struggle with. It could be lots of different things we can abstain from. There's a reason why, there's certain religions and everything else and cultures which have done this for millennia, because it is beneficial doing these things, right? Because a lot of times we surrender to the wrong things, right? Whether that be drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, food. So abstinence can be a good thing, but for most, you don't want to be fasting straight off the bat. You want to be building that foundation first. So look, let me get into what actually works instead, right? Having high protein, so having at least 30 grams of protein for that first meal, breakfast, right? The research shows this. At least 30 grams is going to give you more sustained energy. It's going to keep you more satiated. And also, it's going to help you build just a really healthy habit of being mindful, and it becomes automatic then having protein for breakfast, right? So at least 30 to 50 grams minimum for your first meal. And I would say for most, if you eat 2 meals a day and you can get enough protein in, you can eat real food, you feel like you're winning with your results and everything else, fantastic. But most people, I feel like you need to eat, like say three times a day. You need to be eating protein at least 30 to 50 grams every meal. You want to be hitting about, let's just round it off to a gram per pound of body weight, a gram of protein per pound of body weight each day. Depends on what your goal is, but I like to use that because it always works regardless of who the person is. Now you can fine tune that if you want to build muscle, you want to lose weight, whatever. Yes, you need more protein if you're going to if you want to be in a calorie deficit, you need more than that, ideally a bit more than that. So you can retain muscle, blunt your appetite more and everything else. And you can do with, You can get away with less protein when you're in calorie surplus. But generally, if you go for a gram per pound of body weight, you want to be in mainly whole foods and complete meals, right? When I say complete meals, I mean, right, are you getting essential protein and fats in, right? So are you eating your grass-fed beef? Grass-fed beef's great because obviously you're getting pretty much all the nutrients you need. You could just eat that forever or nothing else, and you may not even get a nutrient deficiency. It wouldn't be ideal though, right? Also, things like sardines and salmon, right? Now, sardines, I would say, is even better because it's not a predatory fish like a salmon, right? If you eat salmon, you want to get wild, but even then, with all the microplastics and everything else they find in the ocean, yes, the sardines are going to be consuming that as well, but the sardines are not going to, they're lower down on the food chain, right? So they're not a predatory fish like salmon, they're small fish, right? So they don't have as much heavy metals and everything else in them, right? So I always say most people hate sardines, that's the only problem. I always say sardines are like in my top 5 foods of superfoods with grass-fed beef and side. I'll get into another whole new podcast for the other ones, right? But sardines as well, they're loaded with iron, they got B vitamins, B12 in particular, obviously omega-3. Even if you were having even if you had tins, I don't know, 3 to 4 tins a week, you're going to get more than enough omega-3 for the week. Salmon, if you had 2 to 3 salmon fillets, you're going to get more than enough omega-3 for the week. But the good thing about sardines, like even if you get them out of the tin, the bones, you're going to get calcium as well, right? And like I say, you're getting way less of the toxins and the pollutants that the salmons will naturally eat because they're predatory fish, right? So they're going to be eating more fish, which also contain more metals and everything else, right? So I say sardines are the best, but most people don't like the taste. Most of you are like, oh, this is disgusting. So yeah, salmon. So having those type of meats on your plates is going to be key. And then obviously, I would say having some fiber as well, right? So it depends on gut health and everything else. But if you can digest vegetables, great. Eat vegetables on your plate too. And getting some of those healthy fats in as well, right? So adding some of those avocados in here and there, cooking with your ghee oils, your beef tallows. So you're getting those healthy fats in, you're getting complete sources of protein in, and you're having complete meals, and you're also having enough sodium as well, right? A lot of people, especially people who eat mainly whole foods, they actually end up not getting suboptimal amounts of sodium, salt, and that has a massive impact on energy because you need sodium to hydrate, to get water and hydrate the tissues. It's one thing getting it into the body, water, and into the bloodstream, but getting it actually into the tissues, you need to have enough sodium or electrolytes to be doing that, right? So complete meals, make sure you're having enough salt, especially if you eat mainly whole foods. And if you have low carbs, you need even more sodium. So you definitely want to be having some electrolytes then. So they're the things you want to be looking at: the high protein meals, the whole foods, and then it's calorie control, right? How do you manage your calorie? If you don't track, fine. But if you're looking to lose fat, are you managing to continuously drop a bit of weight, or are you stuck? Have you plateaued? If you've plateaued, then either number one, you're not controlling your calories as well as you think you are, right? So you're actually eating more than you thought you were. Or number two, I'll give you both of these. Number two, you probably just were in a deficit for too long, and then your metabolism has adapted, right? And it's become more efficient with calories. That's what happens when you're in a prolonged calorie deficit. What used to be your maintenance calories are no longer your maintenance calories. They are, what used to be a calorie deficit for you is no longer a calorie deficit, right? It's now your maintenance calories because your metabolism essentially slows down when you are in a prolonged calorie deficit. So you likely need to focus on building muscle, doing a maintenance phase, focus on building muscle, and then focus on maintaining weight, or at least, or even reverse dieting, right? By bumping, like let's say you're constantly losing weight. If you're that person who's constantly losing weight and you're still losing, great. But once you've done that for a number of months, right? Depending on how you're feeling, that's another conversation. But if you've noticed that like your sleep's getting impacted, your energy's not the best, your strength's dropping in the gym, they're all signs that you need to go into a maintenance phase for like a month or two where you maintain your weight, right? So you bump your calories up, maintain your weight, focus on, see if you can build some muscle there. Or like most people need to reverse diet, right? I'll do a whole new podcast on this, but they need to focus on building muscle, slowly increasing food, but doing it the smart way. It's not as simple for people who've been in struggling with their weight their whole life to just say eat more. It's not that straightforward. You have to have a strategy. It looks different for everyone, right? And even my client said earlier on, he was like, man, he was on a call with me and my other client. He was like, now I understand. He was like, because he's only ever had calls with me. Yeah, he had a call with a few others one time, but he said, you have to wear different hats. And I can see how different everyone is, right? Just from having the other guy on. They were two different conversations in terms of nutrition, completely different methods with two clients, right? So you need to have You need to look at that variance, right? What are you going to adhere to, and make sure you avoid nutrient deficiencies. That's key. So you got to be making sure you're having complete meals, whole foods, like I say. But then you want to be really focused on that resistance training and daily movement. It's very simple. Sleep is the foundation. Forget about all this if you're not optimizing sleep, right? But training, movement, and eating, and then nutrition, eating good quality foods, controlling your calories, and hitting protein. That's it in a nutshell. If one of those things is off, like nutrition, for example, you need to make, like, say one of those things, let's say it's a special occasion or Christmas or whatever, birthdays, all those kind of things, and you're going to eat more, then you have to make sure the other two are dialed. So two of those three have to be dialed. The movement, the training need to be dialed, especially if your nutrition slips. And then the same goes the other way around, right? If your nutrition is pretty good, and you're training well, but you're not moving much. Sorry, if you're not moving much, you have to make sure your nutrition and training is dialed, right? Keep it very simple. These are the things that work. It's not rocket science. It's not bloody giving you all these long words so I sound really intelligent. I'm telling you what actually works, right? And you've got to optimize your metabolism, like I said before. So what that means is getting your body to burn as many calories as it can by itself. And you do that from strength training, fueling your body in a way to build muscle, reverse dieting for most. That's how you're going to optimize your metabolism, because then your metabolism is going to become more developed and your body's going to burn more and more energy and calories by itself, by you not doing any extra, just by adding muscle to your body and getting stronger. But also you need to look at health, hormones. This is what I look at on this assessment, right? Hormones, gut health, all those kind of things. That is what's going to basically dictate your body's ability to lose fat and to get to the next level. So look, I'm going to wrap this up with another thing as well. I'm going to give you my fasting guide for free. I actually developed a really good fasting guide, which breaks down the different methods and how you can really integrate that into your lifestyle. And obviously the different methods, but also, like I say, it's not about like just giving you information, right? You can get that from ChatGPT. It's about, this is what works, right? These are the fasting methods, and this is how you can integrate it into your lifestyle, more importantly. So that's in the show notes as well, with the metabolic assessment. If you want that for free, that's all good. So to summarize on the fasting stuff though, right? Don't use fasting just to lose weight. Okay. It's a bad idea if you're using it just to lose weight. You can use it as a tool. Now, I want a little disclaimer here as well. When I was doing not my last bodybuilding comp, the one before that, I ate 2 meals a day because I wanted to enjoy my meals more, because I was in a calorie deficit, right? I was getting shredded. So I wanted to have those 2 meals so I could look forward to 2 big meals. And that worked for me and it felt easier. So when you're eating in the smaller window, right? Sometimes it's harder to overeat when you're eating in a smaller window, right? Because you've got less time to eat the calories, right? So sometimes that can work. But the issue with that is when you then go back to normal eating, right? Then you end up eating more, because you feel like you've restricted yourself and you haven't worked on the behaviors. You're still not eating the best quality foods. You're eating foods which make you want to eat more. And then you're constantly spinning your wheels, right? So like I keep saying, you have to have that foundation there. So I used to use that as a tool when I was getting shredded. But again, I got to a good level with my relationship with food, right? So we've got to look at that first. So it can help reset your gut as well. I think it's a great tool you can use to reset your gut if you're getting a lot of issues. Obviously, the best thing you can do is basically stop feeding the gut, right? You need to empty the gut as much as you can when you're getting real bad gut issues, right? So that's when I always use it, right? If I'm getting any gut issue, I'll just stop stressing the gut out, stop putting food in it, right? Obviously, mental clarity can help, but a lot of that is going to be cortisol and stress hormones, right? Some of the time. But for me, in the morning, my caffeine, boom, I'm good, but I'm fully aware that I'm running on cortisol, bit of adrenaline, right, as well, when I'm in that fasted state. It's simple. It becomes more easier when you're fasting because you have to prep less meals. But people use that as an excuse as well. People are always looking for the easy option. And that's where I'm not calling out all the carnivores and stuff, right? But it's great if it's working for you. If it's working for you, I'm all for it, my friend. Don't take it the wrong way, right? But I even got lazy with it when I was eating carnivore, right? Because prepping vegetables and potatoes and stuff takes more time than frying a steak, right? So simplicity is good, but it's not always the answer. It can actually be you cutting corners and actually being lazy a lot of the times, right? Oh, I'm going to fast because it's easy and simple. That's not always the right reason to do it, right? It's not ideal if you're training hard, right? Fasting is not always going to be ideal because, again, added stress on the body when you're training hard. So sometimes having more frequent meals to aid recovery and replenish and not put yourself into too big a deficit is a good thing. So it can help with recovery. And you got to be really mindful of the binge restrict cycles when it comes to fasting, right? So look, it's not the enemy. Fasting, it can be a great tool to use, but obviously it's not the answer either. The answer is working on your behaviors with food. In other words, why you eat, how foods make you feel, etc. Eating good quality foods, having high protein consistently, strength training, doing regular movement, let's say 8,000 steps a day. If you can do that, depending on where you're at, just regular movement is the most important thing. And optimizing sleep, right? There's no way of getting around those big rocks. And look at fasting as more of a pebble as opposed to a big rock, right? So it's a tool you can use from your toolbox a bit later down the line for most. All right, with that, ladies and gents, check out this video next. It's related to this fasting topic, and you'll get a ton of value from it because we went into more detail on that one. And yeah, I think you'll get a lot of value from that one. Yeah, and like I said, the metabolic assessment and the fasting guide is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, give it a like, comment beneath on YouTube. Really appreciate everyone's support. Don't forget to subscribe as well to the channel. All right, until next time.